Welcome to Serenity Speaks, Conversations on Wellness. I'm your host, Cleo, and this is Self-Care Sunday. Over the coming weeks, we're going to be exploring all things wellness, balance, and self-care. So whether you're listening while you're sipping your morning tea or taking a mindful walk, I'm really glad that you're joining me today. So today's episode is focusing on self-care, how we treat ourselves. You know, we often push our needs to the bottom of the list because we're just too busy or feel that we don't have the time for self-care. But is that the right approach? What are we actually saying to ourselves when we treat our well-being as an afterthought? So let's get into it. A common scenario I'm sure you're familiar with. You know, you've had a long day, work is demanding, maybe there are family commitments, or you're juggling school or side projects. And by the time you get home, you're exhausted. Now, for some, there's no positive intentions inwards, so it doesn't even feature. The idea of doing anything for yourself seems like a luxury you simply don't have time for or even care for. Does that sound familiar? The truth is, we live in a culture that glorifies being busy. We're constantly on the go, and in the hustle to accomplish everything, we forget that our well-being is not just important, it's essential. When we neglect self-care, what we're actually doing is sending a message to ourselves that we aren't as important as our to-do list, that our needs can wait. But can they? And if so, at what cost? So let's just take a moment to reflect. When you don't prioritise yourself, how does that impact the quality of your life? Do you find yourself feeling drained, irritable, or burnt out? And if so, you are not alone. But we should be asking ourselves, what would happen if we started treating our own well-being with the same importance that we give to our responsibilities? So here's something I want you to think about. Self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary. You can't pour from an empty cup. And while this might sound a bit cliche, it's absolutely true. We are more capable, more present, and more engaged in every aspect of our lives when we take time to recharge and nurture ourselves. First, we need to recognise that time for self-care doesn't need to be lengthy. Self-care doesn't have to be a full day at the spa or hours spent meditating, although those things are amazing if you can manage them. But for many of us, self-care can happen in small amounts. It's the 5 or 10 minutes you take to stretch when you wake up, the 5 minutes of deep breathing in between meetings, or even just a mindful cup of tea in the afternoons. So let's make time, not find time. Think about that. Make time for yourself the way you would make time for an important appointment or meeting. Schedule it into your day because really your well-being is just as important, in fact more important than any meeting. And here's some practical ways you can start implementing self-care into your busy life. Start small. if you're new to self-care, and you might surprise yourself that you might already be doing certain things, but start with just 5 to 10 minutes a day. As I mentioned, stretching, journaling, a short meditation, deep breathing, just allowing yourself to daydream, look out of the window, walk barefoot on the grass. Think about how you can incorporate self-care into the things you're already doing. For example, if you're cooking dinner, listen to your favourite podcast, like this one. Or whilst brushing your teeth, take a moment to practice mindfulness and focus on how you're brushing your teeth, where the brush moves, how the brush feels, focusing on your breathing. Set boundaries. Often the reason we don't have time for self-care is because we overextend ourselves. Learn to say no to things that just don't serve you. Your time and energy are valuable, and protecting them is a form of self-care. Sleep, and I know I've mentioned this in previous episodes, is a foundational element of self-care. No matter how busy you are, getting enough sleep should be non-negotiable. So start by creating a calming bedtime routine that signals to your body that it's time to wind down. And be kind to yourself. If you miss a day or don't follow through with your self-care plan, don't beat yourself up. The key is to be flexible and compassionate with yourself, because life happens. Start again in the next moment, the next 5 minutes, or start again tomorrow. One of the biggest shifts we can make in how we treat ourselves is by reframing self-care as essential, not optional. When we treat self-care like an afterthought, it feels expendable. But when we recognise it as the foundation of our well-being, it becomes something that we simply can't go without. Think of it like maintaining a car. And if you don't take care of it regularly, it's eventually going to break down. It's exactly the same for our bodies and minds. Regular maintenance through self-care helps us to avoid burnout and sustain our energy, focus and joy over the long term. I want to challenge you to look at how you treat yourself, especially when you're busy or stressed. Are you pushing your needs aside? Telling yourself you'll get to it later? And if so, it's time to change that narrative. You deserve to be cared for. You deserve to take time for yourself, even in the busiest seasons of your life. So, as we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with a small challenge. This week, I want you to carve out just 5 minutes a day for yourself. I practice yoga and my meditations as I wake. Get out of bed, yoga, meditation. And before I go to bed, I meditate. But you have to do what suits you. So it could be in the morning, it could be during a break at work or in your day, right before bed. And just use that time to do something that nourishes your mind, body and or soul. And remember, it doesn't have to be grand. extensive, just something that reminds you that you matter. You could give yourself a little massage. You could give yourself a little pamper, a facial. Get down to reading that book that you've been promising yourself that you will read. Give yourself a head massage. I always find that's amazing. Head, feet. Just something that is time for you. And I can promise you, you start with 5 minutes a day. Set your alarm. Say, this is my 5 minutes. And what you're going to find very, very quickly is that 5 minutes turns into 10 minutes, turns into 15 minutes. Next thing you know, it's an hour. And that's really the aim. That's where we're trying to get to. You know, this idea that we don't have time is a decision we're making. There's a saying, and I can't remember, it could be anonymous, for yoga and meditation. If you don't have time for a 10-minute yoga session or a 10-minute meditation, you actually need an hour. You know, because if everything you're doing in your life comes before you, something is really wrong. So giving yourself, or starting with that 5 minutes into your daily schedule, once in the morning, once in the evening, is the start of creating a new behaviour. And the more you do it, the more you want to do it, the more it becomes part of your everyday life. You know, it could be that you're having a stressful day at work. Step out of that situation. I always used to go into the bathroom, go into the toilet stall and just sit and breathe and boost myself up. And when I say breathe, it doesn't have to be, you know, a breathing exercise. It's just more about noticing how you're feeling, how you're breathing. Are your breaths short and shallow? And the more you focus on your breath, the calmer you feel. It slows down automatically. Once you get into the mindset and the frame of, I need to look after myself, it just becomes so natural. You'll find you won't have to schedule time in with yourself. You will just do that automatically. If you're feeling stressed sitting in traffic because you're going to be late, notice that. Notice how you're breathing, noticing how you feel, noticing the narrative of the conversation that you're having with yourself. Are you cursing yourself? Oh, I'm late again, and you know, people are waiting for me and they're going to think I'm incompetent. All the negative thoughts that we have, notice those, push them aside and flip them around. If you're feeling overworked and stressed, that's not your imagination, that's because you're overworked and stressed. So starting with small steps, 5 minutes, 10 minutes per day, will turn into a major or a bigger part of your life and your routine on a daily basis. Because if you're not okay, ultimately nothing's okay. So you do have to put yourself first. It's not selfish, it's a necessity. And I'd really love to hear how people get on with that little challenge. 5 minutes a day, just for you. See how you get on. So thank you for joining me today on Serenity Speaks. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love to hear if you could subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, leave a review. And remember, self-care isn't selfish, it's survival. Wishing you peace, love and serenity. Listen, Dave.